Welcome, Mountain Mamas, to this training on children's illnesses. Now, I wanted to kind of premise that all the first aid training that we do is from this book. It's Backcountry First Aid and Extended Care by Buck Tilton. And this little book is the kind of little cheat sheet we have inside all our first aid kits and a summary of the wilderness first responder course and curriculum that we use as lead guides. So that's where I'm getting all the information from. And then just kind of some of my own information. I'm also a nurse, so I'm not a pediatric nurse though. Oh my gosh, I'm a hospice nurse. I get asked pediatric questions all the time and I don't know a lot about pediatrics. So anyway, so I'm just going to share my best and we're going to collaborate too. We have some gals that are listening as well in our Zoom. So at the end, if anyone has questions, we'll open that up and we can talk about that as well. So the big thing with little people is that their bodies are still developing and they take a little bit longer to adjust to things, to hot, to cold. And especially, I don't know, I feel like my 3-year-old has like cold tolerance. She loves swimming suits in December and she says she's totally fine, even though she's covered in goosebumps. So anyway, their little bodies take a little bit of adjusting and they're still developing. And so we need to be a lot more aware of, especially, I'm going to first start with temperature, heat-related illnesses and things like that with children, just because we just have to be very much aware that they take a little bit longer to adjust. They gain their core heat. So what happens is they get hotter faster than we do. And so that's what, when I talk about taking longer to adjust, like our bodies are adapted for heat. And we've kind of, as an adult, you have a lot of mass to absorb temperature fluctuations and stuff, and they don't as much. So we need just to be aware that they're a lot more sensitive, I guess. And so they need time to acclimate is kind of how I'm trying to explain it. So their internal heating regulation system is not quite as developed as ours. And the larger the surface area is then for heat dissipation in relation to our body mass. So anyway, it just takes them a little bit longer to adjust and things to heat. So the things that we can do to help children with heat especially is to just tell them to drink lots of water. You can't drink for children, trying to get them to drink lots of water is hard because usually they fight you and they don't want to do it. So you can try putting in, I just like flavored water is really helpful. I'm potty training a 3-year-old right now, and flavored water has been a game changer for us, and it's totally hydrating her and she's doing fantastic and pounding the water. So whatever it takes to get your kid to drink as much water as possible, and then taking them out on smaller hikes as the summer comes on, little shorter distances, like we're going to do a little 15-minute hike, and we'll do like a half hour and just kind of work our way out into the heat and things like that. Second thing I wanted to share was children and diarrhea. So kids can dehydrate a lot faster than adults. And for them, losing a lot of fluid can be a lot more devastating than for adults. So one of the best things to tell dehydration in a kid is their urine color. Now, I don't know how to tell you the color of urine in the mountains, but if you can tell, like at least at home, or like if you're camping or something like that, and you have, I don't know, porta potty or something. Anyway, you can tell if it's a darker color, your kid's not getting as much hydration. You can also watch out for other symptoms would be a headache, unusual fatigue, loss of appetite, nausea, things that would make you think that they've kind of got the flu. You might actually try checking out hydration first. So try getting them some water or flavored water, whatever you can, and just see if that might help them. If a child is really dehydrated, they're going to start becoming restless and have unusual loss of interest in whatever's going on around them. So just not really paying attention to what's going on for that. So with dehydration related to diarrhea. So if you've got a child has diarrhea, then we want to treat with a mild antidiuretic or antidiarrheal medication, which would be like an Imodium. And I usually like to carry those on me. You'd want to make sure you know before just throwing a bunch of Imodium pills in a Ziploc bag and calling it good. Make sure you read for your kids, like can they kind of have half a tablet? Can they have a full tablet? Kind of things what's appropriate for them. You'd want to avoid milk for that day. And for infants, they do really well on rice cereal, applesauce, and bananas for a couple of days. If you've heard of the brat diet, bananas, so BRAT, bananas, rice, applesauce, toast. This works really good if someone's got a child has diarrhea. Because obviously the thing with diarrhea is we're worried about losing lots of fluids, and not just fluids, but electrolytes as well. So we want to really kind of supplement that as best we can. So those kind of foods, if we can get them on regular foods, that's fantastic. Otherwise, we're going to talk about hydration options. So treating dehydration, whether it's from diarrhea, vomiting, or heat, the best is using oral rehydration salts. They're called ORS. And that works even better than plain water, just because it's supplementing those salts back into your body that they're losing through that rapid loss of fluids through diarrhea. This is not a salt tablet. So if any of you guys have to take salt tablets, that's totally different. So it's an ORS. If you do not carry around ORS tablets, like I don't, we don't have a kid that has propensity for diarrhea. You can make your own by adding 8 teaspoons of sugar and 1 teaspoon of salt to a liter of water. So you can do this by just having little salt or sugar packets with you. You could just make that really easy. So honestly, if we were going on a longer trip, like a week-long backpacking trip or a camping trip with your kids, and you're worried about something, I'm always worried about diarrhea and especially diarrhea when you've got weird foods and you've got weird water sources that they're drinking out of. I would just go ahead and just throw some salt and sugar in my little packets in my pack, or bring the ORS tablets just in case. And then some Imodium too, if your kid's big enough for that. But yeah, it can really affect these kids really easily and quickly. So we want to keep a close eye on that. Kids and sunshine. So sun is worse on kids than adults, even though they may not see the damage for 30 years. We might not see the damage now. We're all seeing the damage now from our childhood sunburns. But 80% of the skin damage comes from the sun, happens in the first 20 years of life, which is kind of depressing. It's already too late for most of us. But kids sunburn a lot more easier than adults. So we need to make sure that they're wearing long sleeve, like clothing woven tightly to protect their skin from UV lights, hats with a brim, sunscreen to protect their their skin, and ultraviolet A and B damage on skin. Make sure you have a sunscreen that can protect against both of those ultraviolet ray wavelengths, and an SPF that's strong enough. Like assume that it's not, the SPF is not as strong as they say it is. They usually like to bump their number a little bit higher. And as you guys know, like SPF 100 is probably not really SPF 100, but we don't want to be shooting for SPF 15. You know, I usually lose something in the 30s, and maybe you guys have your own theories and stuff with your kids and things like that, but make sure you're giving a nice uniform coat to your kids. You know, a few inches of water will not protect your kids from sunburn. And even if they have a nice little base tan, some of our kids, I've got kids that got beautiful brown skin. They're still getting sun damage, even though they look beautiful. So I need to be better at making sure the sunscreen's applied well. And especially if you got a kid under 1 year old, you really want to keep them out of the sun as much as possible. Their skin is so incredibly sensitive, and it can do a lot of damage. So yeah, really keep an eye on that. And then just wearing sunglasses to protect their little eyeballs. And the treatment for sunburns, cool water is great. I always love using aloe vera. That's fantastic. If you need to use cool compresses because of the pain, that's fine. You can use a moisturizing lotion. I usually like to use that after an aloe vera gel at first, because the aloe vera just helps pull that heat out. And then you can use Tylenol in whatever form they can take, a liquid Tylenol or a pill Tylenol, whatever. And then of course, lots and lots of water. And you can refer to our training on sunburn, burns and things like that. If it's a serious burn, they're pretty bad. But yeah, keep an eye on that. The next thing I want to talk about was kids and insects. They love insects. And they're fantastic, unless their mom has terrified them of insects, which also happens. I would say the best thing for kids and insects is teaching your kids what are your poisonous spiders, and what are the things that can hurt them. And then all the other things are fine to play with. I'm not creating too much of a bug phobia. That's a little pet peeve of mine. But, you know, in our area in Utah, We've got black widow spiders, super easy to identify. The hobo spider is a little bit tricky. It looks a lot like the wool spider. The wool spiders are big, brown, fuzzy, long-legged spiders, but they have black stripes on their legs. The hobos don't. The hobos have I might get really confused with the recluse, but the one with the violin, those are the big things that you just kind of want to watch out for. So I just tell my kids if they're not like looks brown and fuzzy or black and like a black widow, the little jumping spiders we can play with, the daddy long legs we can play with, the cat faces and the orb spiders, they're all fun. Anyway, spiders don't want to be played with anyway, so it's not usually a mute point. But anyway, and then as far as stinging insects, we all know bees, wasps. Usually kids don't want to play with that. They know those ones pretty well. Mosquitoes and things like that. But all the other critters are fine to play with as long as you don't pull off other legs. So I would say carry like sting wipes in your little first aid kit, because things are going to happen and they get bumped, they get bit and things like that. Try the sting cream and then try hydrocortisone. Usually a 1% is just over the counter. That helps with itching as well. And then for prevention, you do your insect repellent. Keep it off their hands in this area, because like the hands like to do lots of this, and then they're going to get repelled. Same thing with sunscreen, of course. But yeah, just keep it out of their face as much as possible. And also, if you don't like using the DEET insect repellents, you can use natural repellents, such as lemon eucalyptus oil has been very has been as effective as approximately 8% concentration of DEET. So that's also another natural one if you want to use that in your first aid kit. Now, kids and poisons. Poisonous substances in the outside world aren't as common as the ones inside our houses. So the things we want to worry about in the outside world would be poisonous plants is the biggest thing. Eating poisonous plants. I know one of our gals' boy loves to eat things and wishes he could eat all sorts of things in the mountains. And my kids probably would too if they knew. And so obviously I'm not going to teach my kids to eat any berries that I haven't 100% identified and eaten myself. And there's only like 3 that I would do that with. So be very careful on what they decide they're going to munch on in the mountains. And then of course, knowing the poisonous sumac, poisonous ivy, poison, I think that's the poison oak. We usually have poison ivy here in Utah where we live. We positively identified that in our foothills. We've got stinging nettle, which is a total beast. So help your kids to identify that. Basically, it looks like a mint leaf, but it's got the jagged edges like a mint. But if you look at it, the stalk actually has needles that come off of it. So that's a good one to identify. And it has little balls, green balls in the summertime, the seeds that you can see. So stinging nettle is one we want to always make sure we're pointing out to our kids when we're hiking. And then of course, to go back to the poison ivy and things, if it's leaves of 3, let it be. And poison ivy will get pretty, those leaves can get really big and they'll kind of have a little lobe, 3-lobed in the groups of 3. So identify it for yourself and then make sure you're always pointing that out when you're hiking, and then you'll have really smart kids. And then they actually are really fun and they tell all their friends and try not to touch it or push them into it, whatever. But anyway, you've taught them, whatever, don't tell them not to ingest it. If some child does ingest some sort of poison that we're worried about, we want to actually induce vomiting as soon as possible and give them lots and lots of water, about 8 ounces. And then you can try and actually stimulate the gag reflex on them with your finger, but do not stimulate the gag reflex or induce vomiting if they are having seizures, if they're lethargic, or if you feel like they're going to lose consciousness, if they've already thrown up, or if they've ingested a corrosive substance, which would burn their mouth or lips, or if they've ingested a petroleum product like Vaseline or something like that. So those are the 5 do not induce vomiting. So just kind of be aware of that. I would say if they've induced something that's poisonous, I would be evacuating them as soon as possible and calling poison control at the same time. So you would want to make sure that you're know the poison control number of your area. And I've called poison control so many times. I feel like every 6 months we're talking about something. Anyway, so they're fairly fantastic. So feel free to give them a buzz. So kids and medications, children under 5 usually cannot swallow pills. So they're always we give them the liquid medications, of course. When they're older than that, you can do crushed pills. In a pinch, I think that if it was dose appropriate for your child, you could crush a medication, and I'll put it in applesauce, and I am successful about half of the time. So that's an option for kids who have difficulty swallowing pills. Even like my 7-year-old would have difficulty with pills. So that might be helpful. I always like to make sure I've got Tylenol and ibuprofen and kids doses, and then also an antihistamine, like a Benadryl, and then probably an Imodium would be like your 4 kid medicines that you'd want to make sure were dose appropriate and have in your first aid kit at all times when you're kids. Now, kids getting lost, that's the next topic. I would say anytime you take a kid into the mountains, make sure, this is my preference, is make sure they have a whistle and a first aid kit in their little backpacks. And their first aid kit can have just a few little Band-Aids, and that's it. And then you can pack in whatever other fun things that they want to put in there. You can get the little, anti-sting cream or antihistamine ointment or whatever, little Neosporin packets and things like that. You can put that in there, but for sure Band-Aids. I feel like they're really good at helping each other too. If someone gets a little owie, they can go over and clean it and then put on a Band-Aid, and they feel super good and proud of themselves. So that's great. And then as far as getting lost, I always love to have a whistle with my child when they're old enough to know how to use a whistle. And we practice with that. You might consider having a whistle. My preference is to have it tied, if they've got a little vest or a little backpack, tied it on there. You can do it around the neck. I'm always worried. I have children that love to strangle. I have one child who likes to strangle herself. So maybe sure it's a breakaway necklace, but something that they can have close to them that they can blow. And we practice blowing 3 times. 3 times means I'm hurt, I need help. And then as a parent, I also have a whistle, and so I can blow 3 times back. So that's something that's kind of fun to practice when you're just on a hike and say, okay, I'm going to have you, make sure I'm not running too far away, but, go like 20 steps over there and use your whistle. And then I'm going to blow, and then we're going to meet up together, make sure we can find each other. And this is just like a fun thing to practice, because you never know what's going to happen when if you've got runner kids, you never know when this might be something that's concerning. And then teach your children that if they get lost, to hug a tree. This is really the idea being that they stop running around like a crazy person. Like if they're like, I don't know where I am, I don't know where mom or dad is, find a tree and hug it and sit down next to it and start blowing your whistle. And don't leave, and we will find you. So those would be your 2 big things for getting lost. Use your whistle, stay put, hug a tree. Those have been 2 very helpful things that could save a kid's life. So anyway, last thing is kids and ouchies. Like we were talking about with Band-Aids, they love to put Band-Aids on everything. And maybe your older kids aren't super into this, but our kids are. So teach them how to, if they can learn how to take care of their own injuries, that will save you some time. Because most of their injuries, I usually say, if it's not bleeding, I'm not going to put a Band-Aid on it, but you can go with your own rule of thumb. And if they're in charge of their own Band-Aids and you've got a lot of them, they can put on as many as they want to if they fall down and get hurt and scraped. But if something's bleeding, then we want to make sure they clean it with if they've got water, that's fantastic. If you've got a wet wipe, that'll work. If you can even get those little sandy wipes and stuff like that, that works. Alcohol wipes will also work, and they are so painful. I feel like a child would love to do that on someone else, but not on themselves. So I don't know whether you want to have them do that or not. But once an area is clean, then we can put on just a Band-Aid if it's not a bad thing. Or if we're worried about infection, we can put on a little bit of Neosporin and have that in a little packet, and they can just squeeze that on. Make sure it's not on that place where you put your Band-Aids, and then slap your Band-Aid on. So one of those 2 things, make sure it's clean, put on some ointment, put on a Band-Aid, and they'll feel super empowered and ready to go. So that concludes our education and training on children injuries and illnesses. Do you ladies in the forum have any questions or anything you want to ask about, or any of your situations that have happened with your kids in the mountains that you had questions about?
I have a little question. I've used, when we were talking earlier about the sunburns with the aloe, I've used like the liquid aloe, like 100% aloe that you can just get in like the big jugs from like Walmart, for example. I mean, I've personally found that seemed to work really well, but I don't know if you have experience or if you have comments or concerns about that, but just, I don't know. What are your thoughts, I guess, on the liquid aloe?
I think that's fantastic. And I know that this is like, you women out there could add like a million different tips and things that you've discovered for your kids. And so, yeah, I think that's fantastic, Lisa. Yeah, that's a great tip. Any other tips or thoughts, ladies?
So for any time you think it's going to get dark, I love glow sticks. I love how the kids will actually want them. But it also means that I know where they are at all times because I can see them playing with them. So I just like to give my kids glow sticks whenever we go camping, whenever we're going to be somewhere and it's going to start getting dark, just because then I always know where they are.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, if they're really young, they don't even think you can see them. And it's awesome.
Do you do like the necklace or do you bracelets or how do you do it?
Whatever it is that I'll get them to like it. And then I'll wear it too. You know, I'll let them pick my own color or something like this. Is when my kids were littler, but just whatever that makes them visible. Sometimes if they're wearing a long jacket and the bracelet goes underneath, that's not so much, but you know, that like ones they put on their head or something like that, just whatever. Just so you know where they are when they're hiding in the woods.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love it. And then if you've got older kids, you know, just have them wear their headlamp and when they're running around.
Eventually they say no. but by that point, you're not really worried about them in the same way when they lose interest in glow sticks. They're older.
Right. You feel like they can make their way back, hopefully.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, glow sticks. I love it. That's a great thing to just have in your pack. Because you know, a lot of times your hikes end up being a little later. Sometimes you're out there past dark. And like you said, of course, if you're camping and things like that, that's a brilliant idea. Yeah. Fantastic. Any other thoughts or comments? All right. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. And we're so grateful to have you join us on our training. Thank you so much.